Aye, happy St. Patrick's Day to you. So this is an alcoholic beverage in a fancy glass. It's a Goldschlager. So this is going to be part of the tale, and it's fitting for St. Paddy's Day in my opinion. So Goldschlager, of course, has minute amounts of gold in it. And weaving this tale, and it's potentially just a tale that may be more fiction than truth, but it seems like a reasonable thing to do on a St. Paddy's Day. So we're going to look at the unfortunate but potentially real reality of the occulting of the wisdom of what gold maybe can do for you. And I'm just digging into this now, and it could go deeper than I suspected. I suspect. Here's to that. And in essence, the idea is that gold might have very real benefits, particularly mental health benefits, if you ingest it daily for upwards of 3 months. And similarly with minute amount of silver, but you certainly don't want to take too much because it'll turn you blue. But the idea here is that gold is the most electrically conductive element, and so by consuming it, you're actually enhancing your ability to be electric in some sense. Your brain functions in an electric way, and so by having gold in your system, the idea is that it can increase, maybe just your IQ, but maybe things beyond that, maybe spiritual things as well. So getting deep into it, this might be part of the reason why it's occulted, especially if you've dug into control mechanisms that might be in play on this planet. So I'm not saying that we ought to, I'm just suggesting that maybe have a look into it and see what you think. And silver for infections and enhancing your gut and staving off, colds and flus and these sorts of things, enhancing your immune system. I'm actually wearing silver for multiple reasons. This kind of looks neat, but it's also a store of value. You can find these things on eBay for almost the cost of production. It's also very cheap right now. Silver's at like $17 an ounce. It still could go cheaper. It could go into the single digits potentially, but it's the level of disparity between gold and silver is actually at a kind of an unprecedented level in some sense. So especially when we look at the nature of our financial system and how tenuous it seems to be right now with the amounts of debt and stuff. And that's another downside to things like gold. You think about how expensive it is for the average person to hold, and that it seems to be very hoarded in general. And I'll do a little bit of a tangent. I've talked about this before, but it is an interesting story, and it's about the Wizard of Oz. There's actually potentially a deeper reality to the story of the Wizard of Oz. I wasn't planning on getting into this, but it's a fascinating thing. Bill Still, I believe his name, did a whole documentary on this. In the original, written by Frank L. Baum, Dorothy did not have ruby slippers. She in fact had silver slippers. And this plays a pivotal role in the hidden meaning, if there was a hidden meaning in this. So Frank L. Baum wrote this story in 1894, and at the time a man named William Jennings Bryant was running for presidential candidacy and in the United States. And the idea there was that he was pushing for something called the silver standard. Now, in the present day, we have completely decoupled from a silver standard or a gold standard. We, in fact, run pure fiat and are backed just by the government's decree. But at that time, gold and silver, gold in particular, was hedged. Your fiat dollar, your dollar was connected to a reserve of silver, gold, and he was fighting for a silver standard, and that was sort of up against the powers that be at that point. In the story, we see Dorothy walking around the yellow brick road, which in this movie symbolizes the gold standard, and she meets three main characters in the story that become compatriots of hers, and those are the lion, which represents here William Jennings Bryant, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the story is that he was worried about, I think, losing his life, but he still stood up for this, and so he did in fact have courage. And then there's the scarecrow, which is supposed to represent the farmers who thought they didn't understand the system, but they did in fact understand it better than they maybe were given credit. They actually understood how the elites were hoarding these sorts of things and that it wasn't working well for them. And then there's the Tin Man, which represented the factory workers at the time, and they had to bond together, and they were to kind of compete against the people pushing the average worker down, if that makes sense. The Emerald City was, I think, related to Washington, D.C., Man Behind the Curtain and these sorts of things. And then the witches would, let's just say, particular power people across the planet. And then by clicking her silver slippers together, she returned to Kansas. So this is my St. Paddy's Day gold drink to you. Be well, folks.